Talk to us about the significance of labeling state-affiliated media. And is labeling enough, or should it be blocked entirely to stop the spread of disinformation?
These are really hard questions, Emily. Thanks for having me on. First of all, the labeling state media initiatives actually began in early 2020 when we started to see accounts out of China, Chinese state media, using Facebook ads in particular, to push false and misleading claims about COVID to audiences worldwide. That was one of the initial events that kind of precipitated the idea that people who are receiving information should know what the source is, particularly if the source is from an account linked to a foreign government. A lot of the conversation about disinformation on social media focuses on the bots and the trolls and the kind of covert chatter that comes and goes. We see waves of accounts come and then get taken down. And those accounts are interesting. Those accounts can potentially shape a conversation, maybe participate in making something trend. But ultimately, state media accounts have standing audiences in the tens to hundreds of millions of followers. And these are the mouthpieces, the very overt, attributable broadcast mouthpieces that governments have built up over time to put their view of events out to the world. A conflict, sorry, go ahead.
Let's talk about that. In the current conflict, what are you seeing from Russian state-run media that is particularly alarming, and how widespread is it on big social platforms?
So what we're seeing is states using their media outlets to target different types of messages to different people depending on where they are. So Russia has not really done a whole lot targeting Western audiences in this particular conflict. We are not the audiences that they consider most relevant. They're really focusing their communication domestically on their own citizens, trying to create support for a conflict. And then they're focusing near to the conflict itself, trying to mislead the people of Ukraine, trying to make them think that their government is leaving, that their fighters are giving up, that the resistance is collapsing, to demoralize the public there. And that is where, and particularly in a situation like this, some of the false and misleading information, including that put out by state media, can have a significant degree of harm in the conflict area itself. So Western audiences or non-regional audiences are a wholly separate issue. They may be trying to shape public perception, but ultimately the thing that is of real concern that platforms are trying to be aware of is information from Russia targeting people in Ukraine or targeting people in the immediate region because they are trying to use the information war to bolster the shooting war.
And to your understanding, what has the impact of that been? I mean, we've heard reports from folks in Russia, folks who have family in Russia, that many of them don't have any idea the extent of what's really going on.
We've seen the same commentary from people, from even captured soldiers, who say we were told that they would welcome us. We were not told that this was what we were going to be going there for. So there's a whole lot to kind of unpack and try to understand in that dynamic. But one thing that's been really remarkable about this is the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian ministers, constantly on Twitter, constantly on social platforms, on Telegram and other places, telling the world what is actually happening, actively pre-bunking. You have President Zelensky regularly streaming himself, reinforcing the fact we are here, we are fighting. And so in that action, in that quite visible use of social media from the Ukrainian government, from the people of Ukraine, you are seeing a pretty remarkable pushback against Russia's efforts here. And this is where this question of what should be blocked, what should be allowed, the people are spending a lot of time actually kind of flooding the pages of Russian state media, leaving pro-Ukraine comments at this point. So I think the decision to respond to governments in Europe and others who want to see content either made inaccessible or temporarily blocked in certain regions makes sense in a particular part of the world that maybe is more directly impacted by certain types of misinformation, versus what we're seeing in the West, where American audiences can still go and see this content if they're so inclined.
Absolutely. The way that President Zelensky has been communicating with his people and with people around the world has been incredibly powerful. What do you think the platform should be doing? I mean, Meta announced it stopped recommending Russian state media to Facebook and Instagram users. Is that enough? Is it enough to do it now? Should it be, last beyond, when this war, or hopefully this war, is over?
That's a really challenging question. For a long time, we've had this idea, in America, that under something like the Foreign Agent Registration Act, we should know what foreign governments are saying. We should be able to receive that information, that communication. But in a time of crisis such as this, in a time in which life and death decisions can come about as a result of people seeing incorrect information, there are rules that are being put into play in the short term that need to be more carefully considered as we evaluate where to go in the long term.
Now, you talked about how difficult it is to discern misinformation on TikTok in particular. Is there something different about TikTok that makes it more of a minefield when it comes to misinformation, and why?
TikTok is, most people consume TikTok in their app. It's, I opened up my TikTok the other night, and the very first video that began to play was a video game, and it had a, nameless account. It was a shooting video game, first-person shooter, and they were claiming that this was a scene of a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And Twitter has been pretty good about either labeling or throttling these. Facebook as well. But on TikTok, there it is with kind of a million likes, and it's right there the first thing that plays. And so the other thing that TikTok does not have is actually that very basic state media labeling. So when there is content that is produced by propagandists, the audience doesn't know. So this combination of content being repurposed, content being put out by an unverified or actively incentivized to harm kind of source, the people who are receiving the content on the platform can't tell. It takes them a lot of extra time to go and try to reverse image search a clip from a video, which is not something that is native or easy to do on a mobile phone when the information is being pushed to you. So I think that TikTok really lags its partners in the social media, of the big social media players, in not having these policies in place. And more importantly, we're seeing Meta and we're seeing Twitter reacting very quickly to either take down networks that they've found or to come up with these new labeling policies that are specifically tailored for the current events on the ground. And we don't really see TikTok following suit in that regard.